When I look at all of the project and the crypto industry that claim they are doing AI, it's always kind of a joke because they slap a keywords, but the technology is really not what Gineesh would be able to use, in my opinion. In order to do properly AI, the data is king. That's why the decentralized file storage is really critical, and I ended up finding Jackal.
Today we're discussing decentralized storage.
I'm the CEO of Jackal Labs, where we build application-specific blockchains for data storage.
And the importance of AI as it pertains to decentralized storage.
My background is machine learning, and I started practicing it for last 17 years.
We'll ask the tough questions to determine what kind of applications can be built using Jackal.
What kind of data is more optimized for your database?
And stick around for the questions from the community. How does Jackal differentiate from RLC, file, ICP, and other decentralized storage? Let's jump right in. Welcome back to the show. My name is Mikhail, always hanging out here with Patrick, but for today's purpose, we're going to refer to him as Crypto Rookies because this is a Patrick takeover. We got two Patricks here on the call. We're joined by Patrick of Jackal Protocol, as well as Gineesh. So we got two exciting guests today to join us to discuss AI and decentralized storage. So this is going to be a great conversation. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And before we kick things off, why don't we go around and do a quick introduction? Gineesh, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I work as a lead data scientist in Hydroinformatics Institute. My background is essentially machine learning, all machine learning. So basically, I learned machine learning and I started practicing it for last 17 years. So with a specific focus on computer vision. So I've built many systems, which is for different organizations in terms of actually delivering insights from the images and the cameras around the world, right? So that's a quick introduction of mine.
Amazing. 17 years. That's definitely quite some time. Looking forward to picking your brain a little bit about the latest and greatest in AI. How about yourself, Patrick?
Yeah, I don't even look like I'm 17 years old, but at the end of the day, so I'm the co-founder of the Jackal Protocol. So I'm the CEO of Jackal Labs, where we build application-specific blockchains for data storage and kind of having data permissions and on-chain privacy and all that good stuff. Before I was doing this, I was working in digital forensics investigations for law firms and corporations, and I got into crypto by investigating flash loan attacks. Actually, was my entry in working for law firms on civil recovery of cryptocurrency. So that's how I learned the technology. We wanted to build a e-discovery tool for court while using kind of blockchain technology for track and trace of digital evidence as it makes its way to the bench. And we built that on Polygon, and then we needed a data storage layer, and everything currently on the market didn't have the privacy posture, clean forensic environments, self-custody, and all that good stuff. Also just programmability in general. It was kind of mostly just cold storage and archiving use cases, which is still really important and awesome to have. But we found a niche for us where we decided to leave everything and start building the Jackal Protocol.
Amazing. Yeah, you're definitely speaking my language on the investigation and security side.
Oh, really?
That's what I do by day in terms of, I work for a cybersecurity company in Web3. So exciting to kind of hear about your background. And Crypto Rookies, you're the one that really sparked this debate, or I should say, you started this conversation. What is it about AI and decentralized storage that really gravitated you towards this?
But I think for me is when I look at all of the project and the crypto industry that claim they are doing AI, when I look under the hood, it's always kind of a joke because they slap a keywords, but the technology is really not what Gineesh would be able to use, in my opinion, to actually do their work. So that's why I wanted to go a bit deeper. And at the end of the day, in order to do properly AI, the data is king. We call it like digital gold. It's not Bitcoin in this case, it's the data itself when it comes to AI. So that's why the decentralized file storage is really critical, that it's done properly. And I think when I looked at Filecoin, I was a bit disappointed because it's really not built and optimized properly for AI, even though people assume that if the AI narrative in a decentralized fashion kicks off, that Filecoin will benefit the most. And that, to me, that's not really true. So that's why I was really trying to find protocol of decentralized file storage that was more appropriate for that. And I ended up finding Jackal in this case. There's probably a few others that have been recommended, but like today we'll look more in Jackal.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, and it's funny that a lot of people don't really look into kind of the the technology a lot. Something that we've noticed a lot in Web3, and we really pride ourselves of focusing on doing the boring cryptography and doing the hard work to kind of give the picks and shovels for people to build web scale applications in general. And we think that kind of, you look in the last 2 cycles of blockchain, from our kind of point of view, looking back, it was really hyper competitive and really kind of concentrated in specific verticals, whether that's DeFi, NFTs, things along those lines, where a lot of people didn't do the boring cryptography, or even the bridging technology to this day is really still really weak. Decentralized compute is getting a lot better. Decentralized storage is getting a lot better. The bridges are getting better, and just kind of having that interoperability for the ability to build a web scale application is, we're just getting to that point now. Depending on what you want from a kind of what values you have for this decentralized Web3 AI product, right? If you want centralization and you want kind of to run everything on in AWS, and you want to have like API spaghetti in the background to pull it all together, and you're not really worried about kind of the self-custody or the sovereignty or the information supply chain attacks or things along those lines, then kind of building it that way, that's totally fine. But for people that want to kind of have programmability from the smart contract level, where smart contracts can read and write to off-chain data storage, if you want something where you can do smart contract calls or AI agents running on blockchain technology, where they have the ability to interface with the blockchain or interface with data storage, and kind of want to have native hot storage on chain with programmable privacy, or the ability to sell data sets and all these different things, we're just getting to the point where we're able to do things like that. And that's what I'm excited about in general. We think that the next few years are going to be really exciting. We've been speaking with a lot of people doing AI kind of agents is the big thing that we've seen a lot so far. We haven't seen much outside of AI agents. We've seen, we're kind of hopefully going to be partnering with the Cash pretty soon, where they're kind of doing things where they have a compute marketplace, which is interesting, where you can kind of have, you can lease compute. You need an A100 or something. You can spend that out for pretty cheap, and you can do your thing. End of the day, we're excited. It's the picks and shovels are almost there, and we think the next few years are really exciting in general.
That's great to hear. And it's interesting about your collaboration with Akash, because I feel like a lot of people may feel like you guys were competing with each other, right? But that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, we've heard that a few times. Everyone's apparently competing with each other. But even in storage,
so cosmos, right?
Yeah, well, it's we're not really competing with anyone in the Cosmos ecosystem in general, right? Even if you look Jackal versus Filecoin, we do such different things. Filecoin's a marketplace for really, really cheap storage, but it's like put your files away for a long time. Like if you want to access that file, it can take up to 24 hours to get your file back, right? It's iceberg or cold storage, and that's an awesome use case, and it's really, really needed. You don't really have privacy. You can kind of layer on your own encryption if you want. Now you have to manage all these encryption keys locally, which is its own thing. But their use case and our use case are very different. We're more expensive because we're hot storage, for example. On-chain permissions is something that we have built in the protocol, and proof of work versus proof of stake blockchains. We both do very different things, and we're optimized for very different things. For us versus Akash, for example, we do storage. Jackal, a good way to put it, Jackal doesn't do math. We just do kind of parking space, and Akash does a compute marketplace where you can purchase compute, you can lease compute for a little bit, and then you can do your thing with your AI. You want to train it, you can do stuff like that. So we do two very different important things in a tech stack in general.
Gineesh, what are your thoughts on all this? You've heard Patrick talk about Jackal and some of the differences between what he's building and Filecoin and Cash, which is not necessarily a competitor. But in terms of AI applications, like what kind of like supporting tools, what kind of decentralized storage solutions do you need in order to successfully build an AI application?
Yeah. So two things actually here. Like now. So there is a lot of hype around AI. So like the way the ChatGPT had came out, and the kind of like marketing which had gone into the ChatGPT had made it believe that we had reached a kind of like truly AGI, which in the case it's not. So the fundamentally people have to understand that. So this is a kind of probabilistically generating a sequence of sentence is the fundamental technology. And now the way it goes, to me, like the entry barrier for like small time players into the market had become like extremely difficult, mainly because so this is a kind of network. We are, in a simple sense, this is a neural network which is trained on an enormous amount of data, which is actually collected by one single entity, and there is a enormous amount of computing power that is used to build this model. So there are like two functions. So any model, for that matter, is a combination of data and a compute, and there are like some scripts or tuning parameters which will allow you to generate this particular data. So now, So there are only few players which can actually directly enter here. But now what I believe, this is a kind of important thing that the decentralization looks at. So it will allow you to distribute and then allow people to participate into this entire game of machine learning development. So now if you look into the cases of like successful entities of machine learning, so if you have heard about Hugging Face, so there's a kind of open source community that actually builds models, shares the models, and shares the data. But eventually, the back end of it also, there is like a single server that actually hosts all of it. And this adds to the trust issue also, right? So the people like, so anytime I build models with the Hugging Face and share the models with Hugging Face, so this will again go to like a decentralized server. So that's what I believe. The crypto or the blockchain technology have a kind of good way in to see how you can actually manage this data and how you can actually allow to facilitate a distributed training. So that's what I think.
I couldn't agree more with that in general. Just democratizing the storage layer in general and having redundancy in a decentralized nature where you can democratize access to training data or foundational models or whatever it might be, and kind of staying true to the open source nature of those things. And depending on what geographical region you are in, you might have different restrictions compared to other geographical regions. And that's why the internet is beautiful, right? You have democratizing access, or you can think about other interesting things as well, where selling data sets, for example, that's usually kind of something that would be reserved for really large organizations. But kind of in a decentralized nature, you can get your pals, we can go out, we can go and find a really valuable data set, whether it's we're cold calling prices for SaaS applications to send us all through the process to gather data on how much things cost, for example, and selling access to a data set like that. We think that kind of just laying the groundwork and kind of rethinking the foundational layers of the tech stack that we need to produce something like AI in general, and making something that's resilient and not prone to centralized choke points of failure, depending on who's in charge. And the other thing is, in this day and age, information kind of supply chain attacks in general, where now you're kind of framing the input data going into training the AI, we think that's really dangerous as well. So defending against that, using distributed storage technology to protect your data sets, or have kind of, we have this thing called the Jackal Proof of Persistence protocol, which we think is really important, where we have Jackal is this like not a storage marketplace. It's you pay for storage space from the protocol, and then we have all these nodes all around the world that store data. In the event that one computer unplugs, for example, the blockchain realizes that that file is missing, and then it breaks that storage contract, rebinds it with another provider, and then copies from other forms of redundancy. So having resiliency against specific attacks on information, or kind of attacks on kind of distributed access or decentralized access to this information, we think is really important, and we're excited to kind of produce products like that.
Yeah, this sounds really interesting. When I speak to Patrick, so this is one of the things which I thought, because when we look at the data as a data scientist or a machine learning practitioner, so it's a kind of evolving data. So we look all of like what is the data that comes into building a model need to be like, once it is deployed, will be like bookkept. So the same way you follow a currency, like what is it? If you miss like one element of the data, we don't consider that to be like a kind of system. So right now we do something called as like MLOps, which is a kind of, again, a bit of old way of storing information with the software systems. So you look at the checksums and then say that, okay, this version is correct. So yeah, every version of the data and every version of a code actually distills a new model. So that way, like what is the once it is deployed, the life doesn't end there. So you actually get the new user data, and then you look at like what kind of responses my model is producing in the real time, and then again this data flows back into the system, and then a new version of the data comes out. So this is very interesting use case, like where you see you get like affordable storage, and then you also get the facility to know what exactly goes into the transaction to my database. So which is kind of difficult now, I would say. If you look at the kind of, for code, you always have Git has solved this problem. But at the same time, for data, people are trying to solve this problem by just associating with Git, trying to keep this checksum inside Git, all kinds of things which we do. But in my experience, I haven't seen like a kind of fully like wholeheartedly, like, I don't have to mistrust my data. So that kind of feeling, you have to do like a lot of circus to reach there.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
The thing, maybe we could take a step back a little bit, because for me, technology itself is irrelevant. What I'm looking for is commercial application that can be used by either businesses or individual to provide services that are valuable. So if we look at AI, there's probably three kind of very different applications that probably require different type of data storage. Like Gineesh, you're much more specialized in computer vision, for example. So data about computer vision is probably very different than textual kind of application like ChatGPT, which is a lot more chat and like text. And lastly, when it comes to crypto, probably a lot of AI application will be about computing data price and like time series data, which is also a very different kind of use case of how to store that data. So in terms of database requirement, in order to try to build AI model for those three use cases, what would be the most important feature from a file storage perspective, I guess?
Yeah. So, Patrick, to answer your question on, I think we have to go so the problem. What I mentioned is mostly about once the data is actually available, or like the point of view of a person who builds the model. But even before coming there, I think whether it's like going to be, so we call typically all the video and the audio extra into unstructured data, which is like hard to get into like a tabular form. Like in simple sense, I would say if you can put it in an Excel, so we just call it as tabular data, it's much more easy to handle structured. And the other kind of like video, as you rightly mentioned, is complex. But I think so that is okay to do. So to prepare all this like data, whether in either of these forms, so people still need, what I immediately see is kind of annotation activity. So you actually initially has to prepare this data, right? So that preparation data itself have a kind of like good business potential. If you look at the total machine learning industry, so people who prepare this data is a kind of like, it's a very, very different. So since most of the machine learning engineers are like high priced stuff, all this work is typically outsourced. Even in the video processing or audio processing, even in the text manipulation, somebody has to annotate this data, which means they have to provide kind of right output, expected output to do like a kind of supervised learning. So if you look, that business itself is actually, I'm not sure about everything since I'm not like the business person, so I may not be able to tell right the number of that. But this is a large amount of work which we do right now is actually typically put it into a third-party company, which is also related to the quality of the data. So the data comes and it actually pushed it to like a set of annotators, maybe hundreds and thousands of annotators, work on this data, clean it, and push it back. So this loop back itself is like go through like a payment contract, which is like what somebody has to verify the data quality, and then the parent company process the payment. So this itself, I feel kind of like it's something which involves a payment, quality assurance, and a data distribution, which also could be like a kind of use case where of this file storage systems can immediately offer. So when I talk to different annotation companies, we call them like annotation companies. So they also use in the backend, like anyway, they have to build the entire system, monolithic or like a single server kind of system to amass all this data and then give back the information back. So this is kind of another use case which I could think of in terms of actually having application, because all the machine learning community need annotated data, and then this is a platform on which actually the people can build on.
Yeah, another thing is the intersection of blockchain technology and AI is I think a big one's going to be data marketplaces in general. So selling access to valuable data sets to integrate with AI. I think another thing, well, I've heard a lot of people working in the AI agent space for whether it's finance, trading, whether it's kind of going out there and doing different things. It's the sky's the limit, and until it's really built and matures, it's going to be hard for us to predict. But the kind of the cross section between AI for us is two things. It's kind of having a really, really high security posture around data sets for AI. Let's say you're a company and you say, I want to store all this data, or I want to sell all this data so you can train AI on it or something along those lines, right? Your options right now to do that is you can store it locally and kind of have a high digital privacy and cybersecurity posture around that because it's valuable. So you want to protect it, right? At the end of the day. Your other option is you can throw it on Amazon, Microsoft, Alibaba Cloud, Google Cloud, and then transfer it that way. The issue with that is you don't have self-custody and ownership of that data anymore. Now it sits on a third party where they can access it, right? So that's kind of an interesting piece about this, where you can have really, really secure data marketplaces and you can have self-custodial cloud storage without sacrificing security and privacy posture. That's kind of where I think data in AI, in our vision of it, kind of intersects with blockchain technology, because when you look at a blockchain, what is it, right? It's a fancy Excel spreadsheet on a bunch of machines arguing with each other all around the world. That's, if you want to distill it down to the simplest thing possible, that's what it is. So what does an Excel spreadsheet that is always right really good for? Transferring money, that's one good thing, right? Who has what things at what time, that's another good thing. For us, we see it as a data permission system of who has access to what data at what time. That's always right and always secure, right? And no third party can kick you off of it. It kind of democratizes access to having having access to really large data sets or selling really large data sets, and kind of evens the playing field a little bit in that perspective, and giving people access all over the world for really, really competitive prices to the infrastructure needed to build these things. That's how we see it, at least internally. And that's where I see the intersection. But there's other intersections. If you want to kind of distill it down to AI, that's where we see it. But data, blockchain technology, and corporations is all kinds of different stuff, right? We can look at something like a hardware wallet, right? You can store your crypto on it. Wonderful. But this can be also a multi-signature wallet around a board of directors controlling a root folder to protect people from ransomware, for example, where the only way into that data set is physically harming people. So that's another awesome enterprise use case, is ransomware protection. You can think about things like e-discovery, peer-to-peer transfer of information without middlemen. That's kind of where we see data and blockchain technology going, but kind of narrowing it down to that AI lens, we really think it's data marketplaces giving AI agents a scalable cloud environment for storage, and kind of democratizing access to the infrastructure needed to build these things, and making sure that no one gets kicked off them at the same time. Depending if you're depending on your geographical region as well, you might have stricter rules, you might kind of be clamped down on a lot. And with all the different things going on right now where regulation's kind of up in the air and we don't know where the chips are going to fall. So if you want to keep building this stuff, we think this is the best tech stack to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is definitely an interesting. Yes, go ahead, Crypto Rookies.
I'm kind of let's look at two specific use cases of AI model that, to me, like nowadays, what is really trending in AI is the stable diffusion algorithm. This is what your generative AI does, like for ChatGPT, but also for like rendering video or images. Yeah. So, but those two things, in terms of data, it's very different. Let's say that we are trying to, like Mid-Journey is making some amazing thing, and Runway is that you can generate images that look photorealistic with AI just by writing text with Mid-Journey. Then you take the image, you pass it through Runway to animate it, and we can maybe foresee a future where entire movie will be generated by AI without even actors necessarily. So this video processing, Gineesh, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is typically stored as binary file, very large binary file, right? And comparing to ChatGPT, which is small snippet of text or maybe bigger amount of text, but it's really text, it's not binary files. So in terms of Jackal, what kind of data is more optimized for your database? Because in the Web 2 world database, there's graph database, there's a sequential database, there's Redis, there's all kinds of databases that are good for specific use case. So I'm wondering what Jackal is really good for in that regard.
Yeah, so Jackal doesn't really act as an awesome database for things like that. We're bucket storage. So for really, really large files, if you want to put them in a place to rest, whether that's an active cloud environment or whether it's a archive or backup or anything along those lines, or you want to move data between two parties, whether it's AI agents or just people, right? Jackal would be a good use case for that, but it's not a database. Just because the way that we had to operate to maintain a high security and privacy posture is we had to kind of have permissions on chain, and kind of having a way to interact with the database through that is not really great because the user experience would be really lame. Good thing about AI is AI doesn't care about user experience. So that might be something a little bit better. But what we primarily do is bucket storage like S3. And that's a use case where it's a very important piece of the tech stack, whether you're building AI or whether you're building really anything, web scale applications in general, or just apps, products, or you just want a Dropbox at the end of the day. We're kind of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to data storage. And that's kind of how we operate and what we built it for.
But that means that like a PDF document would fit well in a bucket, as well as a pictures, like a
Yeah,
collection of pictures?
it doesn't matter what it is. It'll take. It doesn't discriminate. We got parking spots for everyone. So whether it's PDFs, it can be images, media files, JPEGs, MOV files, MP4s, weird files. We'll take it all.
Okay.
Okay.
So in that regard, Gineesh, what kind of AI application would be the best kind for that type of storage?
I think this looks to me like what is as you explained. So this is like totally unstructured data you can handle. So that's what the essence I get out of this conversation, which means it could either like what is used for many of the things. So most of the AI what we do is based on this unstructured data, which is like images, like or text, or even like what is any other binary format, right? So we could actually put it into like a compressed format. So if you look like the model also, all these models work as like a kind of a representation. So whatever data you give, so you just give a representation. So that's why I think it makes it a bit more easy to decentralize. So when one model converts from one node to another node, you don't have to pass the actual data to get an outcome. So you can just pass a representation and get that output from the other part you want. So which means I think it would ideally work for most of the content generation stuff. I think we could actually categorize it for. And yeah, the image interpretations looks like straightforward work if unstructured data is there. So
one other cool thing, Gineesh, is earlier you talked about kind of verifiability, that the data is like data verifiability or data availability kind of as the way that data is stored on. We might be getting too technical here, sorry boys, but the way that the data is stored in general is that each file has its own content identifier, CID, right? We call them FID CIDs, where essentially if you upload a file, the data to Jackal, it gets assigned a content identifier. If a single byte on that file changes, it now has a new content identifier. So it's another interesting thing for verifiability as well. I don't know if that provides any value, but it makes sure that things aren't tampered with at least, or there's not lost in translation, and it kind of provides that data verifiability as well in general for calling specific files or just kind of knowing that it exists.
I think it's too difficult area to enter, but I would say the most true potential would idea come in the medical field itself. So most of the cases when I worked like a couple of years back, the biggest problem in actually, so this is about creating a kind of just X-ray interpretation mechanism. So we used to source different kind of like would say data from different hospitals, so which actually needs a kind of regulatory information. So the problem with this kind of thing is like there are like tons of hospitals which is ready to participate in this research, but they really don't want to like what to say give out the data correctly. And finally, like when we thought about the end application also, right? So it should be either deployed in a hospital or like a individual thing, like about a mobile app. So I have some kind of personal data, like a X-ray of mine, and I would definitely want a result from a good model, but I don't want to like upload my picture or like whatsoever. Yeah. But if there is a mechanism to actually deliver the AI result without compromising the data security, I think most of the industry, the medical industry and other thing is going to just adopt it. Like just they're always apprehensible about sharing the data. So now that's why I think this is a kind of entry to just say that I think yeah. So there is a way to like just make sure that I think you can trace it back to the last chain of all the medical reports of one single person, and then like would say we can give insights. So that kind of model would ideally like a kind of or a mechanism or a platform that can actually give such a thing would ideally kind of I think really good for even big countries like India or like which are really anywhere it's universally applicable. But yeah, it's
we were speaking with a team out of Brazil where they're uploading human genomes to Jackal. So human genomes, but they need to maintain like a high security posture, but they need the scalable cloud environment at the same time. And the cool thing about Jackal is we have on-chain granular permissions. So if you upload to Jackal, I can't access your data. No one can access your data other than the end user with the public and private key cryptography, right? So you can upload a file yourself, and then you can give permissions to, if the AI has its own Jackal account, so we would abstract it all the way in the background, I'm sure. But the only two people that can access that then is the AI and the end user that uploaded it with no other third parties or middlemen in general. It's pretty cool.
This is going to be like very nice for all the, I don't know, I've been like talking to one of the companies in Singapore, like where they have kind of emotional state measurement. So this is basically into psychology. So you use your mobile camera app to just check like how your emotional condition is. So this is again like but the adaptability is like very low, just because people don't want to give their like facial expression or information. But they give a feedback on how good like he is trust or like what current condition is, and it's a kind of monitor of a system. You periodically monitor it, and then you will actually get an idea of what you're going through, what steps you need to take to good mental condition. So such kind of confidential data, including facial, our picture, etc., is going to be like pretty saved, and people will have a kind of more trust to adopt such kind of apps or as dApps, right? So
yeah, we'll stick to apps. We'll stick to apps.
Yeah.
I think it's it's a little bit better at the end of the day, but yeah.
But I do have one other comment and question at the same time. When it comes to AI, you have to differentiate between training the model and then operating the model. And when you're training, like it's like, correct me again if I'm wrong, Gineesh, but you need fast access and then a large amount of bandwidth for file transfer, because the longer the training can take it, we're talking sometimes weeks of training, so it's really costly. And then when you operate, you may want to keep your data live of the user interaction. So I think the database requirements are slightly different between the two. Would you train on a specific data storage and then operate on a different one, or you would want to keep on the both the same?
So it's a good one. So essentially, there are like two kind of systems. So one is like transactional databases, and one are like kind of like what is a large file, like the way like once you train it, so you don't no longer need a continuous access to that. So for transactional data, when it is operational, you just need the transactional databases to be like keep sure that I think your data is coming there. And then for training, so we use like a totally different database where you can do like a kind of fast access, so or like a kind of bulk access or bulk export of the data. Because if you try to like what is it, from our normal databases, try to export the entire historical data of like years, it's going to be like a kind of
long,
very long time. So the priority is like actually the speed of access in the transaction time, and then like what is it, speed of access when I say to individual entry of the particular data. But at the same time, if you go to like a traditional DBs, like what is a SQL kind of things, so which is actually will actually take to export, like you can just put like one record very fast, but at the same time, if you wanted to have like hundreds, thousands of records, it's going to be essentially a very long time. So we use two different technologies to for storage. So
for sure, like training, you'll want like co-located usually, but then again, it's a question of values too, right? It depends if you're true to the decentralization and you're true to all these like self-custody and all these different values, you may want to train a data where it's not co-lo. But at the end of the day, once the model's trained, then you can move it anywhere you want, right? So you can move your foundational models all over the place. So you can store it on Jackal, you can make it available, you can store it on GitHub, right? But for where Jackal would really thrive is I believe would be actually in the application or the interface for the user to use it. Or if it's an AI in general, like an AI agent having its own data storage space where it can find things, put things, it can collect things, it can go and buy all the NFTs you want, and store the JPEGs there. You can do all kinds of stuff with that, right? So it really depends, and every use case is so unique, and the needs of something where you're kind of generate like a text model, like a GPT, you're just generating text, and it's not that much data in general. Versus when you're generating images with a DALL-E or something on those lines, then we're actually producing these it's starting to get a lot more intense from a data storage capacity that you need, where now you have all these JPEGs that you have to be stored somewhere, right? So at the end of the day, it really depends on use cases, and every single company, their situation's unique, and that's why we thrive on being a little bit of a Swiss Army knife and being able to adapt. By default, it's hot storage though, so it's a lot more performant than most things in general when you're looking at the cryptosphere in general.
Okay. Out of curiosity, since you're in that industry every day, is there other kind of decentralized database system that you think have some definite interest for AI technology? For me, I'm thinking Graph and Covalent could be interesting, but like just like in the Web2 world, you have Graph database versus SQL database. I have a feeling that for like something like ChatGPT, maybe a Graph database would be more relevant in this case. Would you go for Graph in this case, or for Covalent, or something similar to that? Or
so Graph database is better in this particular case. But what I am looking at, like, I know this is a kind of OLAP versus OLTP, which is like online transactional database versus analytical database. So this to me, like mostly this is like transactional. The way the Jackal is defined and the things are there, I think there's a huge potential that still I'm not very sure. I think we can do like a bulk transfer out from the database yet. I think that's not going to be like a very easy solution for the training use cases. So that is what the sense I'm getting.
The answer, for the training, like getting the compute involved a little bit. But at the end of the day, the cool thing about Jackal in general is we don't have to move the data. We just get to change the permissions as well, right? So depending on if you can give access to the data itself, it's this whole other thing. Because, like, for example, if I want to peer-to-peer transfer you a petabyte of data, my options are I can fly you here, or I can put a server on a plane and get it to you. Or the cool thing with blockchain technology is we can change permissions every 6 seconds. So now you have full access to that data set. When you want to download it, that's a whole other thing. But if you use it as an active cloud environment, that's a whole different ballgame, which is interesting, right? And that's the cool thing about this technology is we kind of get to rethink everything from first principles again, very, very far down the tech tree, which is...
and Patrick, like, so suddenly I remember like one more thing, like, so as you mentioned earlier, so we have another kind of technique also typically in the machine learning community people use is called federated learning, which is actually not a decentralization, but it is actually kind of distributed learning. So you have actually chunks of data that comes in different places. You can actually train them, but still finally you need to have a kind of ensembling or aggregating the models. So you receive only, like, so let the data be at the local place, so and then let it train on there, but you get a local model, but you have like many such local models, and then you have an aggregation mechanism to produce like a kind of super AI of all, right? So that's a kind of another technique. So such kind of like storage mechanisms are available, which is like kind of distributed. So you can separately store in different databases and then aggregate it later. So this is another way we deal with it right now. I'm not very sure how the compute is attached to the storage in Jackal, I don't know. So, or any of the blockchain technology, I don't know. But this would actually determine how somebody can actually train at the end.
Yeah, it would be something along the lines where you would have to use a cache to get the compute, and then you use Jackal where you pass it a Jackal storage account basically, and it would all be cloud based. So that's how we would have to do it. We wouldn't be able to do it kind of locally, but
I see.
Yeah, it's fun though. At the end of the day, it's we're just trying to piece all this technology together, and we're having a blast doing it. That's for sure.
Before I let you go, because this conversation, I didn't want to interrupt because it was a very thoughtful conversation. Do you have 5 minutes to do a quick like fire round with these?
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So I had to I told the community that we're doing this interview, and your community is extremely expressive and they're very supportive. And so they have a few questions, and you just let me know if we need to skip the question. But I'm just going to fire off right here.
That's all good.
So. How does Jackal differentiate from RLC, file, ICP, and other decentralized storage? I know we went into it a little bit, but if you could just give us a quick summary.
Yeah, so all three of those things listed all do different things, right? ICP and Filecoin don't do the same thing. I think the other one that you mentioned, I think it might be a database or it might be a compute market, if I remember correctly, but there's so many different projects, it's hard to keep count. Jackal does, like Jackal and those other products, we all do kind of different things, and Jackal focuses on hot storage and on-chain permissions is really what we do. And having really, really high availability of that data and having smart contracts ability to read and write to off-chain data storage as well is what our focus is.
What about mobile gaming app? There was somebody that was asking about that, which I thought was a random question. I didn't know if you guys have actually worked on
gaming app. We know there's a team building on us right now that are building a mobile app for Android to be able to kind of back up your Android to Jackal to kind of have a little bit of resiliency. And backups are expensive usually in general if you want to kind of use something. So we offer a pretty economical solution for that.
Any stats on how much storage currently is used and any like revenue numbers that you could share?
Yeah, 100%. Everything's public. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but we have the API. Right now we have 350 something users. Most of them are corporations because we're B2B though. But we do have kind of like that Dropbox use case where you can just stroll up to Jackal and use it. So that's great too. Our utilization rate is about 17%, and we have about 2 petabytes of storage space available right now. So that's usually where we're hanging out. Great. And can the name service be used after the chain upgrade? Yes, of course. So the name service is actually, we're looking to kind of build it out its own actual web portal as well. So it'll be a standalone app. So you can kind of like name cheap. But the cool thing about RNS in general is number one, blockchain public addresses kind of suck to use, and we all knew that. So kind of having a name service associated with a storage network is I can send a file to Gineesh.rns, for example, and then I can just send him files or change permissions to give him access to that. So RNS is going to get a little bit of an upgrade. Other things is referral programs. So we use them as referral codes. So if you convince a friend or you have a business and you want to upload to Jackal or use the Jackal storage account, you can put in your RNS name and you'll get I think it's a 20% kickback of the storage price.
Okay, great. And then last question, are you familiar with a Cumulus encrypted storage system? And if so, how would you compare yourself to them?
I'm not familiar with Cumulus encrypted storage system. Kind of right now, from everything that we've seen on the market, nothing has on-chain permissions. And a lot of people don't have hot storage without centralized middleware. If they do that, awesome. We love a good competitor, but at the end of the day, I don't think that currently exists right now, from my understanding at least.
Great. Well, Patrick, appreciate you sticking around and answering those questions, and also chiming into this, AI, specifically the AI side of, what you're working on. So this was a very, very technical conversation, but I think for those that are very curious about this type of technology, I think very informative. So I want to thank all my guests. We'll do it again soon. Attention builders, if you're building an application, an exchange, a chain, and you want to be part of a thriving Web3 community full of professionals, be sure to go to networkspotlight.io and apply to become a member. We have over 400 members with bi-weekly events for you to keep up with the industry trends and meet the most influential people in the space. And if you're interested in having your project get a tokenomics review, be sure to fill out the form so Patrick can get in contact with you. All links are in the description. Catch you in the next video.